Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is McKay Allen. I'm the Director of Content and Communications at Log My Calls, and we're excited that you're here today for this special webinar, Live Website and Landing Page Critiques with Tim Ash. We'll introduce Tim more in a moment, and we're excited that he's here and we're excited that you're here. First, just a few house cleaning items and setting the scene a little bit. The first question people ask if they're not familiar with Log My Calls is, who is Log My Calls and why do you do these webinars? So to answer those two questions, Log My Calls is a call tracking and call analytics provider. So we essentially offer three types of services. The first is basic call tracking. So we tell marketers which ads, campaigns, and keywords generate phone calls for them. So we can tell them which campaigns are generating a positive ROI and which aren't, which is really useful if you're in the marketing space. And then second, we record phone calls. And third, this is the thing that makes us very unique, is we actually analyze the content of phone calls and extract data from the call conversations themselves. So we're talking data like whether or not the caller was a good lead or a bad lead, whether or not they resulted in a sale or an appointment or a reservation, whatever your method of call conversion is. We can even tell you if the person who answered the phone did a good job selling your product or service. So we literally analyze the words and phrases on the call to extract this type of data, and that's what makes us unique. So that's what Log My Calls does, and as I said, we work with marketers who care about the results of their efforts, essentially. And then the second question is, why do you do all these webinars? We do a lot of webinars. We do 1 to 2 webinars every week. We have incredible guests, as you can see. We have Tim Ash today. Tomorrow we have a webinar with SEM Rush. They're an analytics platform and keyword research platform out of Philadelphia. And we have other incredible guests. And so you can see these webinars at logmycalls.com/webinar, see upcoming webinars. And then also, we also encourage you to go to this page and look for recordings as well. On the back pages, you can see recordings of the webinars that you can access and watch those recordings. And in many of the cases, you can actually read transcripts of the webinar as well. So it's a really effective way to learn more about your craft and become better marketers. A lot of free information on the site. We've done about 180 webinars in the last 18 months, and so it's been a great tool for marketers to learn more. So in terms of how today's going to work, please type into the chat window on your GoToWebinar screen. The chat window is where we want you to put the URL in that you want Tim to analyze and you want him to critique. So in the chat window is where you're going to put those URLs in. So not the question area, but the chat area. So a couple of you, please practice putting that in. We'll make sure it's working. I see a lot of people putting them in the question area. Just make sure they're in the, as I said, the chat area is where you want to put those.
Actually, McKay, I'm not sure that they have access to the chat area now that I'm thinking about it. So
you know what? Then let's do questions, I guess, is the option there. Oh, you know what? I think you're right. Yeah, we've got a lot of URLs in the question. Okay, perfect. So let's do that. So question area, we've got a lot of them coming in. Tim, can you see those?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So type those into the question area. Sorry for the confusion. I guess chat is the way that we communicate with you. So again, put those in the question area. The other thing that I'm interested to learn more about today is where people are dialing in from. So just throw in the name of where you're dialing in from today, the location, the city, the state, wherever it might be. Just so we can get a sense. We've got people from California, Canada, Denver, Virginia, Baltimore, Connecticut, Massachusetts, everywhere. We got Madrid,
Spain, Moscow, my hometown, yeah.
There you go, Las Vegas, New York City. So we're all over the place. I'm calling from Utah. I think, Tim, are you in San Diego, Tim?
I am, 72 Perfect. And hardly cloudy.
So year-round temperature and conditions in San Diego. So, well, why don't we do this? What we also want to do is we want to make sure that you are able to ask Tim questions. So as we go through, as he critiques those pages, ask him questions. I'll read those to him as we go through. And then finally, I'll introduce Tim. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Tim's background. He's the CEO of Site Tuners. He's the founder and chairman of Conversion Conference. He just was speaking, I think, last week at PubCon in Las Vegas. He's keynoted that show, as well as many, many others several times. And so we're excited to have Tim join us today. I think we've done webinars, I think, 3 or 4 times now together, Tim, and we're always excited every time we can you can fit us into your very busy schedule. So thanks for taking the time, Tim, and everybody, thanks for joining us. With that, I'll make you presenter, Tim, and you can go through these and tell them that their baby's ugly, if that's in fact the case. So.
Well, I have no doubt that it's going to be the case. So let's just put that to rest. Yeah, good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world, everyone. My name is Tim Ash. Thanks for that great introduction, McKay. I run an agency based out of San Diego that we work with clients worldwide for about the last 12 years, both large and small companies, and we help them with all aspects of conversion rate optimization. Of course, landing page testing, conversion-focused website redesigns, and ongoing help in the form of conversion management, where we basically help you growth hack your business and make your online marketing more effective. As McKay mentioned, I also run the Worldwide Conversion Conference Series. We have a couple more shows coming up this fall in London and Berlin. I'll be keynoting and doing workshops at those. And then our big, now we've gone to one big standalone annual show next May in Las Vegas. We're going to have some great keynotes from Natalie Nahai, the author of Webs of Influence, and Lance Loveday, the author of Web Design for ROI. Lots of great speakers like Ollie Gardner from Unbounce, Joe Polizzi from Content Marketing World. Basically, if you want to learn by drinking from the fire hose about conversion, I really hope you'll take advantage of our early bird rate, 2 full days, 4 tracks, and an optional workshop by me. All right, well, enough of that. Today what we're going to do is, like McKay said, tell you how ugly your baby is. I appreciate everyone who's typed in a URL. I'm not going to do these in any particular order. So what I'm going to do is point out some things that I think are, how would you say, problem areas with your URLs, and or rather with your websites. And hopefully you'll be able to learn lessons from these that apply to what you're doing. It's something that, what we normally find is that people are, I would say, there are a lot of the same issues going on with websites. So I'll I think you'll see some common themes emerging. All right, here's our first one. This is PlumberStock.com. Okay, so, and I'm showing them on a fairly big monitor. I might make my monitor smaller so you can see it more kind of in a 1024 presentation. Let's say something like this is probably a better way to start out anyway. So this is obviously an e-commerce website that sells plumbing supplies. Since I'm doing a house remodel, this is all very near and dear to my heart. So what's the one thing I want to talk about is visual focus, and this is going to come up again and again on this webinar, and I want you to think about the first impressions and what people look at. And I think what you'll find is that we can't not look at motion. So let's look at the motion on this page. At the bottom of the page we have the logos changing. Now they're grayed out, which is kind of a mixed message, because they're supporting information. Yeah, we carry major brands that you'll recognize like Toto and Sloan and so on, but the motion draws a lot of attention to them every time that flips. Same thing goes with the grab bag of products that you're seeing there. Every second or few seconds it switches, it blinks for some reason. You have a very bright graphic, which is, I'm assuming, some kind of co-op advertising from Moen to tell about the fact that they've been in business 75 years. But it doesn't really help me find products on the site. So all of this motion is extremely distracting. And then because you have such a fairly bland, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I think it's actually a good thing, fairly even, bland presentation on the site, even these kind of things like your banner here, 5-hour energy, free sample with purchase, I mean, that just strikes me as a really strange thing to draw attention to. I'm there to buy a freaking toilet, and you're trying to give me an energy drink. $3 energy drink when I'm about to spend hundreds of dollars on plumbing supplies. So a bit of a disconnect, I would say. All right, well, let's do another one real quick. We have, and I'm picking these, like I said, sort of at random. I'll try to cover as many as I can. And this one is Therashoe.com. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's always fun to just see these live. So. For some reason, it's not loading for me, but hopefully it'll come up here. We might have to do another one because this one is not Oh, here it comes. It just took a little while to load, not sure. Okay, Sterishoe. Try Sterishoe risk-free for 30 days. Of course, there's some kind of shoe. There's a shoe in a bag. Then there's motion. And this is a very common problem with websites that I see. And again, you're going to see what's the first thing you notice. That's what I'm reacting to. And the first thing I notice is all the motion again. And what you have is a slider with frames that go by, and they're like billboards whizzing by in the freeway. And I'm supposed to make a coherent story out of them. So you have your own, not only do the frames change, but even inside of the frames, the text flies in and out. You have your own interface controls for navigating through these. So the picture shows up, then the text, then the button slides in. All of this extraneous motion is actually preventing me from understanding your story as it unfolds. And if you think that I'm going to sit through several frames of your commercial to get that story, remember the web is a medium for people that are in control. We get to click on buttons, click on links, we get to navigate to other websites. Nobody wants to sit still for this kind of serial presentation of a commercial. And even though you only have 3 frames in this commercial, each one takes 2, 3, 4 seconds to load in. So you're asking for potentially about 10 to 12 seconds of my attention. That's a long time on the web. On the web, people have the attention span of a lit match. So you really can't expect them to sit still for commercials. And by the way, anything further down the page, the reason I haven't looked at it is because in the presence of that motion, I won't even be able to detect all of the other things on the page. And you have some great stuff, which I would have elevated, as seen on Good Morning America, accepted by the American Pediatric Association, as seen on the doctors, you know, great customer reviews on Amazon. There's all these trust symbols, but unfortunately, because you've decided to use all of your prime real estate for the commercial and the scrolling banner ad, I don't see any of that stuff, and that's too bad. So what I consider, I mean, besides the motion and the fact that our reptilian brain can't not react to it, what I consider to be a huge sin of these banner ads on top of the pages is that they force you, or they make you lazy. They make you basically not have to tighten down your editorial story and decide what's important, what has to be above the fold on the page. Trust has to be there. If you have the little thumbnail showing me your appearance on the doctors, which you do, I wouldn't make it that big. I'd make it more of a Facebook postage stamp size thing with the play button, but make the doctor's logo real clear on it. But all of that stuff is critical to trust, and in that first few seconds, I need to trust you. And I'm not getting that trust just by seeing the product whiz by and, you know, buttons that say buy it. And by the way, you're doing a good job making the calls to action clear. Unfortunately, they're different. It says order now up top, try now in the middle here, and on some of the frames, the button says buy now. So, or sorry, maybe it's just try now, but you have 3 different kind of competing calls to action that I assume just really lead to the same thing, which is order it. So I think this one is a lot of visual distractions. Again, probably not the first things, not the last time that we're going to come back to that notion. All right, let's take a look at one more website. Here we go. And again, I want to thank everybody who submitted these, because I know it's hard hearing it like this right between the eyes. But you know, hopefully you're getting some good ideas out of this, and also everyone else can do the translation and say, does this apply to my business? Do I have any of these same deadly sins or problems with my site? Again, no big surprise. Most of these are going to be home pages, and we love nothing more than rotating banner ads on the home page. But one of the things is this looks like a fairly technical site, and this is aimed obviously at corporations. And I would say that, again, other than the production quality, which is high and clean, the execution is nice, there's not a lot of trust. And what constitutes trust in a business-to-business setting is comparables in my industry. And again, I'm going to kind of show you that we, as they say in the ad business, eat our own dog food. You know, on our homepage, we show logos, since we're business-to-business business, pardon the redundancy. In grayscale, we have logos of companies we've worked with. And in much the same way here, I want to see that there are comparable companies that have worked with you and had a good outcome. And you probably have that. You have services, solutions by industry. So if I go down by industry, well, let's say I drill down to financial services, and then maybe down at this level, I'm hoping, nope, you actually don't have the clients that work with you on those industries. So basically, in business to business, especially enterprise, you have to show me not only do you work in my industry segment, but within the segment, again, if I may, within each segment, so let's say go to our insurance, law, financial, kind of comparable page, well, you will see hopefully LexisNexis and Intuit and Experian and Paychex and other companies that you go, oh yeah, those are kind of like mine, and therefore we're going to have a good outcome here. So I think you're not making enough use here of trust in the form of client logos. You might also just 1 or 2 30 to 60-second video testimonials, and you don't need a lot of them, but for each vertical industry, I'm the chief technology officer of American Express, and I say that RDX rocks our world, and whatever. Just tell them on a webcam, not some slick produced thing, but just say, can you just for 30 seconds talk to a webcam about what your experience of working with us has been like, and then just email us that file. And that's it. So that goes a long way towards creating trust. So I'd say production quality says that it's a clean site, but I think you need trust in the form of essentially the most relevant things that you can show me in each industry. All right, let's take a look at the next site. And this is dollardays.com. This is obviously, well, not obviously, but some kind of discount site, and it says wholesale everything for everyone. Whoa, okay. Hey, folks, we just got a 10% off today's purchase in exchange for an email. The idea isn't bad. I would really question, before I even went into your site, whether throwing up an interruption like that is a good idea. I'm sure you'll say, yes, we're collecting emails, and some percentage of people will do that. I'm guessing 5 to 10% of people will actually do that if you interrupt them like this. But what's more important for me to understand, especially if it's my first visit there, is do you have anything I want? I don't care about 10% off unless it's off of something I want. And why can't you show me something I want and then on that page say, hey, it's 10% off if you put in your email right now? So what you have here is reliance. Well, again, folks, I hope I can stop talking in depth at least about rotating banner ads. They are evil. Write this down. Banner ads are evil. You can hashtag CRO and @Tim_Ash if you're tweeting this. Get rid of them. Okay, so instead of all that real estate being taken up by that, what should be there? Well, you essentially have a catalog. You have, as you say, wholesale everything for everyone. So you have these high-level navigation categories, right? Apparel and accessories, bath and body, holiday and seasonal. You have all of this stuff, but you're expecting me to read small, tiny text and to navigate your menu by means of that little box. That's not realistic, and instead your whole page is taken over by giant background graphics that don't really help me with anything. They're just flashing by there, again, like annoying commercials. So what you really need to do is turn this page into a grid that represents all of those high-level categories. So if there's, say, 8 of them, maybe you have a 4x2 grid, and each one has that. I mean, you have that graphical representation on the even when I go to your flyover menus. They see how in accessories and apparel you have that rack of clothes and that mannequin. Well, maybe that's not the best picture to represent the category, but whatever your pictures are, entertainment and gift. Okay, I get that. That's a nice composite picture. Those tiles that you're seeing on the flyout menu are what should be on the page. You can't expect people to read text-based navigation. They will only go to your navigation bar if there's a failure of your page content. Write this down. People will only use your navigation if there's a failure of your page content. Again, just to kind of do a quick contrast with our own site, if you're on our home page, we have at our high-level navigation, we have About Us, large business, small business, clients and industries, resource, and blog. Well, we don't rely on you finding large business and small business in our menu. we stick it in the page content. So this is what I like to call a belt and suspenders approach. In other words, you're using your belt to hold up your pants and the suspenders over your shoulders as well. The important stuff has to be repeated in the body of the page. About us, that's this section over here. Resources, that's essentially this section over here. So we've taken our high-level nav bar, and that should be your most important categories, and put that into the body of the page. We're not relying on someone to actually read that nav bar. And I think that's the biggest failure for me here, is I can't at a glance tell the breadth of stuff that you sell. Okay, and that needs to be apparent on visual inspection, not by me having to interact with your little text-based menu and understand it. All right. Okay, let's take a look at our next site. Mr. Disability Insurance, or maybe it's just MR, disabilityinsurance.com. Okay. Good things and bad things. So it's a relatively clean site. It's relatively boring, but again, insurance isn't supposed to necessarily be exciting. There's a picture of people on this page. Now, I already talked about the evils of motion and banner ads of any sort. The way to think about it is that there's kind of a visual hierarchy. There's motion, which will override any graphics, and graphics will in turn override any small text on the page. So there's no motion here. That's good. So then what's going to grab our attention are any prominent graphics. And in this case, people. One thing you should know about the way the brain works is we have a general object recognition system, and then near our emotional midbrain, we actually have a separate part for recognizing faces and people, because they're a really rich source of information about the environment. And that allows us to kind of judge everything from a quick fleeting micro-impression on the face to someone's attractiveness to their degree of aggression or attitude towards us. This is all critical for survival and for a social species like ours. So we will always look at faces, okay? Now, where are those faces looking? Well, the lady is kind of looking off the screen. The guy is looking somewhere else, but at least he's looking in the direction of the form. So be very careful of faces. Use them very deliberately. Use them to draw attention. And one thing that we also know is that because, again, we're social creatures for humans, the direction of the gaze really matters. So in this case, the guy looking at the form is actually a positive thing. Unfortunately, the woman looking past the form directs our attention completely somewhere else. So we're going to see, why is someone looking somewhere? Well, because that's going to alert us to danger or something unique or interesting in the environment. So two things to note. Faces are important, or rather faces will get paid attention to, and where someone looks in relation to the other elements on your page is also very important. This is a fairly text-heavy page. There's nothing wrong with that. You've done a nice job of making your main call to action here clear. It stands out from the page, and this is a great example, in fact, of making the call to action stand out because the rest of the page is relatively benign and boring, but you can think of it as having a Zen-like stillness, and so the call to action naturally arises out of that stillness. You don't have to scream or compete with other parts of the page to get them to see what the important call to action area is. Okay, I would probably focus on making this a little more of what we call the Holy Trinity. When we have a direct response page with a call to action form like that, there are three elements that we look at and we call it the Holy Trinity. The first is the page headline, the second is the action block subheadline, and then the third is the call to action itself, in this case the button. So what those should do is kind of form a visual and conceptual funnel. One is at the top. It should be a full spanning headline across the whole top. What's the page about? Inside of it you have, okay, what happens when I interact with the action block? And inside the action block is you have, okay, what happens when I put this button, or I push this button? So in this case, get own occupation disability insurance for physicians. Okay, I'm assuming physicians know what that means. Okay, get custom quotes for disability insurance. Now, that's a little bit of a different message. If you think about it, you're talking about own occupation disability insurance for physicians, and then you talk about just general disability insurance. So that's a messaging disconnect. And then you have a pretty benign kind of submit quote request. Well, do I want to submit? Well, that's what's going to happen when I push any button. You submit the form, but you know, it's like get your quote in 15 minutes or get your quote same day. put some immediacy into it, or something like that. So basically, I would say, I'd say this page is about affordable, not get, affordable own occupation disability insurance. Instant quote, get my quote in 15 minutes or something like that, or get my quotes in 15 minutes. So one other thing I would question, and you may actually need all this information, but that seems like a kind of a long form. So one thing that I would consider doing is seeing what's the absolute minimum of information you need. So you have their contact information, that's good. You asked for their email early on in the process, that's good. What you want to do is, but comments, medical history, income. Why do you need my income to know whether I'm insurable? Perhaps that's because of the size of my medical practice, I don't know. But one question I would have for you is maybe you can make the form shorter, and this applies to all lead generation. Even if you do need to ask for all this information right away, maybe you can make the first screen shorter and then say continue, and on the next screen ask for a little more information. It's really nice to say, okay, how can we contact you? Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your medical practice, or some other way to group those, and maybe those are on separate screens. Maybe they're in a light box popover sequence so that each screen looks benign and looks easy to fill out, and it doesn't look like a long form. So the way to think about forms in general is to say, okay, does this information, is it absolutely necessary to complete the current transaction? And if you can't answer yes to that, then you probably shouldn't have that field on the form. And even if it is necessary, maybe you should experiment with staging it in different ways. Security questions suck. If you have the CAPTCHA where you have to ask me to retype some warped letters, or even dumb questions like this, what's 1 + 2, or what color is the sky, those do nothing for me. Okay, and there are plenty of forms that don't use security questions or the CAPTCHA letters, the letter recognition. So somebody solved these technical problems. So if you're too lazy, or your IT folks are too lazy to do that, I feel sorry for you, because what you've done is you've thrown up a huge barrier to conversion by having me jump through a hoop that has no value for me. All right, well, let's move on and do another one. Okay, here we go. All right, well, first impression is it's a fairly clean site. It's kind of contemporary. It's also a little kind of on the boring steel gray side, which I'm assuming means it's corporate. But let's just kind of, since there are no strong graphics except for that globe in the background there, let's just really long headline, and it's got a different color in it and an underlined word in it. Okay, and you're expecting, and this is a very well-crafted site, I'm sure you worked on every word of this. My problem is you're expecting people to read. So my first impression is optimize the configuration and flows of your network in a half hour, ... Book your session now. In other words, if I just do that Holy Trinity, and I scan it for meaning of the page and just focus on those three things: headline, action block, subheadline, and call to action, they don't line up. I don't have enough information to make the connections. Optimize your network in a half hour, ... Book your free session now. Free session of what? Don't even get it. Okay, so you're expecting me to read also all the fine print and the connective tissue, and if you're kind of relying rather on me reading text on your page, at least on to orient myself, that's a non-starter. Okay, now again, one thing I want to mention is sometimes you have multiple response mechanisms. So in this one, I see that there's or give us a call. If I were to present a choice as an or side by side and an action block, I would probably arrange it this way, free consultation or whatever the call to action is, form on the left with the button below it, and then or vertical separator line, call us, toll free. Actually, you don't even have a toll free, which for any large company, I know that phone calls don't really cost much anymore, and we don't really care if we call at least domestic long distance, but still having a toll-free number is important. And I would say, call us right now, 724, or whatever hours you're available. So I'd make it clear that it's a side-by-side choice, and I would include a toll-free number for it. Okay. Let's move on to another one. And please keep submitting to them. Like I said, I don't have any particular order I'm taking these in. I'm just jumping around, so I may get to yours yet before the hour is done. All right, our next one is DAT Avail. Wow, we have a lot of these kind of business-to-business services. Oh, okay. Well, flying in things. Again, folks, I'm sorry, but your graphic designers, just like me, probably are frustrated artists, and instead of making art, we're forced to design web pages for a living. But all of that flying in and motion and just all the gears in the brain, that's such a kind of that doesn't tell me anything. Okay, so stock photography in general, and generic stock photography or icons or graphical sets like that, I mean, yeah, it's cool and all, and it's visually intricate, but it's what I call business porn. That whole banner graphic, a guy with gears in the head. I mean, how many times have you seen guy with gears in the head? We all have. Okay, we've seen it in 100 contexts. It carries no meaning other than being its own meme or idea that gets passed around. What does it have to do with database services? If you're trying to make some kind of tenuous tie to we'll manage your databases, you manage your business, I'm still not sure what gears in the head have to do with that. Okay. One of the things that I see here is a technical kind of feature approach to, there's some in-page navigation. You're hoping to grab my eye with those buttons. 3 things you should know about us, 10 ways you can use DAT Avail, solution building blocks, databases supported. I'm sure all those are important at some point. But what is completely missing for me here is any notion of kind of a user-centered design, any recognition of who I am. I don't want an inside-out view of your company, which is going to be, here's our functions, here's our databases supported, here's our whatever. I want an outside-in view. Here I am. What's my relationship to you? Okay. All right. Maybe you care about industries, or maybe you care about company size, or maybe you care about the role in the company. Are you the CFO making this decision? Are database services right for you? Here's the ROI part for the CFO. Here's the part for the end user who's going to be using it. Here's the part for the IT guys that have to implement it. So in a complex sale, enterprise sale like this, there are probably several stakeholders, and you need to speak to each of them in their own language. So I would strongly suggest that you make this more around the roles or the classes of visitors showing up to your site, and not about your capabilities. Stop talking. It's kind of like in the old Charlie Brown cartoons when the grown-ups are talking in the front of the classroom and all the kids hear is wah, 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 wah. I mean, if you're talking about your business, I'm tuned out. If you're talking about me, I'm interested. There's a story about Walter Cronkite, and he was once asked, well, what happens when you get a boring interview subject? And he's one of the greatest interviewers of all time, and he said, there are no boring interview subjects. There are only boring interviewers. And I think the key there, the takeaway, is that you should be talking, you should look for the interest in your audience. You should be making it interesting for them. Okay. Hope that came across. That was a little bit of a unusual connection, but hopefully from journalism to conversion rate optimization, it still makes sense. All right, let's look at a Canadian company. By the way, Cassie, we're not going to put you on our email list. You guys have that new spam law, and we're getting rid of all our Canadian emails. No, just kidding. But they do have a pretty strict spam law that just came out. All right, Seton. Again, banner ad. I like that you do have a product grid. Okay, so you have high-level categories. So if you just got rid of the banner ad and we kind of scroll the page down so we don't see that, and you have 9 high-level product categories. That's great. And you've also made it clear that they are individual. They're not individual products. That they are composite pictures. You have 3 different signs. You have 2 different types of safety cones or traffic controls. You have different tags. So that's really, really good because each of those images has the property of categoriness, if you will. I'm clear that it's not an individual object, that it represents a category. So those of you that have e-commerce or a wide range of different physical goods, make sure you come up with a nice composite that has at least 2 objects, maybe 3 to 5 objects that show the diversity of and full range of stuff, especially visually in those categories, and are kind of archetypical and stand for the categories, so the most common kinds of items. So I think that's really well done. The purpose of your homepage in a large catalog, besides not having me bounce and go away, is to drill down to get closer to the product I'm looking for. It's not to buy a product, it's just to get one step closer. So I assume if I go down this route of traffic controls and cones, and I click on that, okay, now I have, okay, pedestrian crosswalks, traffic signs, and so on. So let's say I want to continue on to cones. Okay, cones, and then safety barrier. Okay, I want those linear ones. So it's very, very easy for me to get down to the products that I was interested in. And now I'm to a page with about a dozen things on it that are all relevant to me. Now I go, oh, cool, there's cones that light up. There are reflective cones. There are orange ones. There are multicolored ones. There are ones that can be attached to the ground versus mobile ones. This is perfect. So how hard was that? Not at all. It's a hierarchical drill down. So one thing I'd encourage you to do is go narrow and deep. Don't be afraid of that extra click for me to go deeper into your site, as long as along the way you're giving me a few simple, very distinct, and mutually exclusive choices. So you can drill down and know that you're getting closer to your goal. That's one of the cornerstones of information foraging theory, which has been very well studied. Basically, the Cliff Notes is that if I feel like I'm getting closer to my goal, I'll be willing to take another step forward. It doesn't matter how many of those little steps there are, as long as each one gets more specific and drill down and drill down. And now, look at this, I get down to a small set of products to consider. So I think, really well done on the category level stuff on the home page and several different levels of drill down. I think that the site on the whole looks a little dated. It could probably use a visual refresh. And to me, this is a kind of wasted space just to basically say that that's the delineators category. I'm not sure I need to read some generic text about it. That's probably for SEO purposes. But I would get rid of that and just show the products themselves at that level. But on the whole, I would say, well done on that. All right, let's take a look at our next one. Body Shapes Medical.
Hey, Tim.
Yes, sure.
Can I ask you a quick question here? We're getting a lot of people asking, you've reviewed several sites so far that have some animation elements and some scrolling elements in the showcase area,
right.
Automatically rotating elements, I should say. Are you against those things as a rule? Is it situational? Like, what are your thoughts on animations and? Okay, so again, so to be clear, I would say motion. We have 220 degrees of motion detection, not fine detail, but motion detection. Then we have our kind of graphics, and then you have text. So this can be viewed as a hierarchy. If there's anything above it, so if you're trying to get me to read text in the presence of graphics, that's difficult to impossible. If you're asking me to look at graphics and that's your main purpose, like a button even in a form, then in the presence of motion, that becomes nearly impossible. Motion will reset our attention. We can't not look when something is rapidly changing in our visual field because our survival depends on reacting to motion. That's what our brains are primarily designed for. And so basically the way to, I'm not saying don't ever use motion. If you're a drug discovery company and you have an animated movie that shows how the cancer blocker rotates and the molecule attaches to the cell receptor and blocks the cancer from getting in, okay, that's probably best explained with a 3D animated movie that lasts 30 seconds, okay? But unless you have something compelling like that, I don't care if there's swipes, dissolves, animations, shimmer effects that flash by repeatedly on lettering, any kind of motion is the nuclear option. Write this down. Using motion on your page is the nuclear option, okay? All you see is a giant mushroom cloud and nothing else survives in the blast radius. So I'm not saying don't do it, but realize that is going to make the consumption of more subtle stuff on your page impossible. And so if your call to action is in text, or you want me to just click a link and do navigation and you have a motion on the page, I'm going to be paying attention to that. And if it's dumb motion like the brands you carry or your social media icons or who's tweeting what about you in the moment and you have a scrolling ticker of that on your homepage, that's the worst kind of all.
So
Okay.
generally, I would say avoid motion and prioritize visually. And so our approach is to make the site boring so that the call to action naturally arises out of that. Don't compete with yourself on your own site for attention.
Makes sense. Perfect. That makes perfect sense, Tim. We're getting a lot of questions about that. I appreciate you explaining it.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're in Body Shapes Medical. Not sure what you do. Looks like you're a local, since you're mentioning Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky. You basically expect me to either read this text, which I'm not doing, or watch this video, and it's talking heads. So one thing that's missing here that's very important, when we come to a page, we expect to see a logo in the upper left, and then it's always very helpful to see a tagline under the logo that explains what you do. So I don't know what you do. I haven't read it, but it's, well, I'm going to read a little. Okay, hormone replacement therapy, or plastic surgery, or some combination of those, or, you know, but when you come to the Site Tuner site and you see our logo, again, just to kind of show you an example, we have our visual logo bug, which we use as our brand color and on social media and other places. We have our name, and then we have one phrase, conversion rate optimization. So tell me functionally what you do. Okay, so if it's a Kentucky, you know, life extension and wellness, you know, in Kentucky, maybe that's what it is. So it's just, again, factual, not like we're wonderful, we're the world's greatest leader in, none of that kind of marketing BS, but functionally, just tell me what you do. Am I on the right site? Because that tagline helps me anchor my experience. Again, don't rely on text and for me to read. And this is, again, I know a local site, but it looks like a single page. You don't have a navigation bar, which is a little strange, because you do have women click here to enter, men click here to enter. That part's fine, and I would probably repeat that, you know, like about us, men, you know, services for men, services for women, you know, contact us. You should make a navigation bar up there. So, you know, you do have good role-based navigation, because obviously you're not going to be giving estrogen therapy to men now, or I hope not, for your sake. Okay, so now you've gotten into the men's section, but unfortunately this is the first place I'm seeing this great trust stuff. Okay, now if you're talking about hormone replacement therapy and it's seen on CBS, ABC, and Fox, you know, if you say on your homepage, we're leaders in hormone replacement therapy as seen on, those trust symbols need to be elevated to your homepage here. But I do like that you have both men and women, which is very distinct. Everybody can self-select and raise their hand. They know whether they're a man or a woman. So that part's well done. It's just way too far down the page. And again, probably production quality, just a quick shout out. I don't think that this is necessarily the highest quality I've seen, and I think these days everybody does judge a book by its cover, and even small businesses and local businesses are expected to have pretty high level of production quality. So if you want me to spend, I assume, thousands or tens of thousands of dollars with you ultimately on ongoing hormone replacement therapy, you got to be much cleaner, high-end look. Also, what would help you here is not necessarily talking, the owners talking about it, but I'd like to hear from clients. So I want to know how many clients you have, that they're happy, that there's people in my situation, you know, I'm losing my libido as a guy, or I'm a woman going through menopause and, you know, I want to maintain my youthful skin, or whatever it is. It'd be nice to have you talking about the visitor, their goals, getting them to very specific pages, and then having testimonials there from people in their situation that have experienced what you guys do. Okay, the hikingtoadventure.com. First impression, it's a very basic site, and no, I get it, you're trying to be all green and outdoorsy, but just the production quality of the straight lines, things not necessarily fitting together, and this is one thing I just want to point out to fit and finish. For example, you have nice vertical separators here in your menu, and then an underline drop shadow, but that's the only place I see that. Then you have a thick kind of stripy lines to separate the sections over here. Then you have a single white key line inside of what I'll generously call your header, and then you have a double key line around this box. So just even little details like that, I mean, they're each of those effects is perfectly fine on its own, but when you start mixing them, it's a bit of a Frankenstein monster. They're serviceable parts, but you put them together, they don't necessarily play well. The other thing is you have a call to action form, but it has no title. It's kind of decapitated, so you expect me to read that text and then fill in a name and email, take me to the free guide. You know what? One of the things I was talking on my Webmaster Radio podcast that I do, if you go to webmasterradio.fm, I have a thought leaders in conversion optimization, and yesterday one of my guests, Harry Goldie, was talking about on any page you should sell the call to action, not the features or the business. So if what you really want me to do on this page is to download this free guide, then that should be the centerpiece of the page, and inside of that form there should be a visual representation of it. You know, and then there should be some 2, 3, 4 bullet points that tell me what the benefit of reading that guide are. So even if it's not the actual cover of it, but just a little carefully designed graphic to represent a thumbnail cover that works at that scale and is visually interesting, then that should be the guide. Okay. It's also strange to me that you have in what seems to be an ad for your own website on your website. So if that's really your logo, I expect that to be up here on the left, but to see kind of an ad for yourself on your website is a little unusual. All right, so let's take a look at our next site. And McKay, it's up to you. I can do this either way, but we can stop in about 5 minutes and then just try to answer more of just the questions instead of doing more of these. So you let me know what you want to do with that.
That's a great idea. Let's do these for about 5 more minutes, Tim, and then we'll do questions. I think that sounds great.
Okay. Pickering Auto. All right. So what you have is a local mechanic or garage. First thing that strikes me is just kind of production quality. It's a little bit on the confused side, and it's very busy visually. One of the things that you see commonly in headers is you pack them full of everything. Now, some of those things belong in a header, some don't. You're using trust symbols like Napa or AAA certified or Facebook likes, or reviews, 5-star rated. That's all good, but that should never be in the header. And you really don't want to go against strong convention, and we saw this on that last hiking adventure site. Where do we expect to see a logo? We expect to see this logo not in the center of the header like this. We expect it almost by default to be in the lower left, upper left rather. So that's a really strong convention, and you don't want to kind of piss against the wind. You want to take advantage of conventions. Where do we expect to see a phone number? Upper right. That's fine. But if you have 2 locations, I'd probably make both those smaller and put them on a single line. So decluttering the header, putting things in more conventional places. Again, you have a rotating banner ad. I think it's important to show that you have a physical location and that it looks nice if you're proud of it, of both the exterior and the interior. But I wouldn't necessarily go with if someone's looking for you by name, if they didn't just go to the yellow pages or look up their local Yelp and find you, they're not necessarily there for different kinds of coupons. They're there to do something in particular. I need a brake job. I need an electrical system. I need a tune-up. And when they get to, look at this, you have 25% off on anything over $200, or that's something that you can tell me once you get me to the right service. So I'm there not just to shop. Oh, gee, I wonder if I need a suspension service today. I need it because I'm bottoming out on every bump and I need a suspension service. So don't talk to me about coupons. Tell me you know suspensions and you can help me fix my suspension. On the suspension page, you used to say, hey, you're in luck because right now any suspension tune-up you get $10 off. And that's fine. But I think that a lot of times we push store-wide or business-wide promotions at the expense of navigation, and the navigation is either your categories for e-commerce, or in the case of a service business like this, it's your service offerings. So those should be front and center. All right, well, I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. So, McKay, just if you want to field some questions, as some folks have typed in, and please continue to type in questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can.
Great. Tim, that was awesome as usual. Let's go through a few of these here just for a few minutes. Do you have any sort of landing page rules, if you will, that maybe be different, that might be different for B2B versus B2C landing pages? Are there, or is it more industry specific than that? Any rules?
Well, I think that the rule of thumb for business to business, what makes it different is the motivation of the people coming. The stakes are much higher for a business to business decision. Whether I use you for DVD duplication, or I switch my computer support to you, or my phone system, or those are, I could lose my job, I can look like an idiot, I can cost my company a lot of money, and have a big disaster that we can't get out from under or we're committed to. It involves huge financial amounts in many cases. So all of business-to-business decision-making is based on covering your butt, and that's why risk avoidance, any kind of trust symbols, any kind of client logos, anything that shows me you've worked with comparable size businesses, and just as importantly in my industry, that's really the key to business-to-business. So again, we'll say, if we go down to showing client logos, long client lists, so these are, we've taken all of our clients, and we work with companies all over the world in a bunch of different fields, and we've broken them up to about a dozen high-level categories, and within each of those, we want you to recognize names. Okay. So I would say trust in the form of both client testimonials and client logos at an industry-specific level is critical in business.
Awesome. And then in terms of, you mentioned one of the first pages you reviewed had a pop-up that was offering like 10% off for, what are your rules on pop-ups like that, whether they're on, because I see some companies have them on their blog sites or on their webinar sites or resource sites, but not necessarily on the home page or on landing pages. What are your rules there? Okay,
well, I don't have any hard and set rules, but just things to consider. First of all, you should never do a pop-up without testing it. A lot of times we just throw it in. Or, for example, you have a pop-up and you're getting emails. You go, okay, that's great. We're building up our email database. What you didn't realize is that that pop-up is now costing you conversions on the back end because people aren't buying from you. So it's often a trade-off. You will get emails, and if you understand the future value of each email you get, you can weigh that financially against the loss of efficiency of your site because you interrupted someone. I think exit pop-ups are usually generally a good thing, and you shouldn't even think twice about it. If I'm about to leave your site, or even move my mouse off of an actionable area on your site, yeah, go ahead, throw me that offer, throw me that discount, ask why I'm leaving. Asking a survey question can be a very powerful thing, and you'll get lots of great information that way. Entry pop-ups are more problematic, especially if they're just triggered by time. A lot of times when you see is these pop-ups happen immediately when you get to a site. I'm trying to look at a page and you interrupted me on the way in. That's generally a bad idea. Again, test it. Your case may be different. Event-based stuff, if you've been on the site for more than 30 seconds or on a page, it looks like you're confused in a particular setting, then we'll pop up an offer to chat, help you. That can be very effective and can actually save sales or increase sales. So there's no such thing as a hard and fast rule, but say exit pop-ups are always safe. Entry pop-ups, you should really give a lot of care on when they appear. And for example, should you have them happen later in the session or on a return visit, chances are you shouldn't spring them on me every time I revisit your page, for example. So higher risk on entry pop-ups.
You bet. And then last question, what about chat? What about, there's a lot of sites that, especially in the in service industries, for example, that will have, and in a lot of industries, that have chat. So a little chat pop-up, maybe someone even engages you and says, hey, do you have a question or how can I help you? What are your thoughts on things like that?
Well, there are three things that I want to comment about chat. One is that it's not widely used in general. So most people, I know if we did a quick survey of, but let's just ask the question in our question window. Let's do a quick chat survey. How many of you have used chat on a website in the last month? Well, you answer yes or no if you've used or have not used chat in the last month. Okay, well, we have a very engaged group of marketers. Never, I see one person, never. Quite a few people saying yes. I'm actually, fairly surprised. So I'd say that we're a biased group. Okay, we can stop now. But one thing is that you can basically say chat is something that's helpful in complicated situations, or if there's a configuration involved, or if there's a lot of trade-offs. So you're looking for a new 4K TV, is that really better than just an HD TV? Does it matter if it's LCD or plasma? All of these things that I'd love to just talk to an expert. One thing about chat, though, is you also have to be very committed to it. What I mean by that, it can't be somebody just reading off of a script and answering from some kind of chat center in another part of the world that doesn't know your product line. I'd say staff it only at times when you can effectively staff it with the right people. Otherwise, you're just going to say, well, that guy that I just chatted with was an idiot and wasn't helpful and wasted my time, and that actually makes things worse.
Okay, great. Awesome. Tim, thank you very much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for your engagement and submitting your URLs. You can see a recording of this webinar on logmycalls.com/webinar, so make sure you visit the site and check out the recording. And then watch for an email from us as well. We'll have the recording in the email tomorrow morning to you. So, Tim, any final thoughts before we close?
My email, someone just asked, is tim@sitetuners.com. We will be following up with you in an email. So, yeah, no, just look. My final thing is the same thing you led with, McKay, which is your baby is ugly. Look for problems with your website. Look at it with the jaundiced eye of a visitor who doesn't know or care about your company, and you will uncover all kinds of problems. And if you've seen some of these mistakes that other folks are making, please go clean them off your site, especially reconsider motion and how you manipulate attention on your page.
Awesome. Tim, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for taking the time with us. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, I believe is the date today. So thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and thanks again, Tim. Bye-bye.